Welcome to the Inner Athlete Podcast, where we discuss all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring. Welcome back to the Inner Athlete Podcast. I have a special guest with me here today, one of our long-serving members as well, Vaso. Vaso has been with us for approximately 2 years now. Her son and daughter train here as well. They're teenage kids. One's about to finish school, and one's in the other one. Son's in year 9. Jeez, he's still got a fair way to go. Do you want to just briefly talk about yourself, and then we'll go more into the topic where it's great that you're training and you're leading by example for your kids, but we've seen such a huge improvement in your kids, but especially your son.
So. I'm mainly a desk worker, and my husband is the ex-athlete of the family. I had one of my kids go straight into sport, and the other one really just not at all. Combine me getting older and realising how important strength training was for me, along with the fact that my daughter stopped her consistent sport, and my son wasn't training. Here I am. Yeah.
So it's been an interesting journey for yourself, because I know you've had a few issues, health-related issues as well. I think you had frozen shoulder at one point. Managed to remedy that.
Yeah.
Relatively quickly, actually.
Yeah, that was really quick with the activation. But it wasn't just that. Before that too, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so my whole idea of how am I going to look after myself into the future took real centre stage after that. And I think that's what really activated me into coming to strength training and doing it in a place where I could be I could really be observed and not get injured.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing moving forward. But let's talk about your kids. So let's talk about your daughter first, then we'll get to your son afterwards. So your daughter, she was competing swimmer. She was a high level swimmer for quite a while, and then she transitioned out. Kind of like, what kind of led to the transition, and what kind of led her to coming here, and then the other activities that she's doing at the moment?
Well, she was training and competing at a national level, so that was obviously a lot of commitment for her. And when COVID came around, it was the biggest challenge in the world to keep swimming. It really was. We didn't have a pool in our backyard or anything like that at the time. Her only option was to swim in the ocean, which she did do for a while, and she swam in the bay with her wetsuit and her cap and her booties and her gloves. So she did that for a while. But it was really the biggest challenge to keep swimming in so many ways during COVID. So that's really what pulled her away from, the constant commitment. So she stopped swimming almost about 6 months after COVID began. She stopped completely, and then it was a staging pattern until after COVID we were able to get out again, and she decided she wanted to take up jiu-jitsu. So Brazilian jiu-jitsu, notoriously hard on joints, and a bit of a challenging kind of pastime, but she loved it, and she did start to become a little bit injured here and there. So it really prompted me into making sure that she had a good basis of muscular strength to keep all those injuries at bay.
Yeah, and she's doing really well. She's developing quite well, being able to tolerate, I guess, the strain and the stress that comes from a sport like jiu-jitsu, because it is, as you mentioned, straining on the joints, very straining. Yeah, it's all about inflicting pain, essentially.
To the limit.
Yeah, of all sports that she picks.
Yeah.
But then your son, and he Talk about the first time, because I remember the first time that he came in and the conversation that Coach Nathan had with him as well. What was that like? And, you know, kind of paint the story of where he was, and then we'll kind of go through his, I guess, hero's journey, essentially.
Yeah, so my son pretty much lay down during COVID in his bed playing computer games and grew about, I don't know, like 30 centimetres.
Wow.
And it was instant. He had stretch marks. He grew so fast. And when he first, we started first. So my daughter and I started first at gym. And over time, it wasn't too long, I started talking to him and saying, what would it be like for you if you did a bit of training with us maybe? And you came with us, we'd just all go together. And the first day, so he agreed. And the first day he came here, he didn't want my daughter or myself watching him while he was training. He was so lacking in confidence and, didn't want to be bad at something that he didn't want anyone observing him. Yeah, so. Then
I know that he felt insecure about the way that he moved, how he was, even like the way that he spoke. He spoke very quietly as well. He was very reserved about, talking about himself. Then I know then he had a moment one time that Nathan had a good chat with him, and after that he kind of got back into the actual session itself, got him onto the bike and then slowly got back into it. And if we fast, then I think it got to the point in the first 3 or 4 months, he kind of came in, not begrudgingly, but it was just kind of like some sort of not resentment, but there was just something holding him back from just being able to put himself 100% into each session. But what we had noticed was he just kind of gradually did a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. And he started to see a little bit more of his confidence build up from there. It's because he started to see his ability in what he was doing. And then at the time, we were also tracking his weights. I think it was tracking the weights and seeing him progress from doing a kettlebell deadlift to doing a trap bar deadlift, and seeing the big contrast in the progress that he was making. It's like, oh, I can do this. And now he's a chatty Cathy on the floor. And then he loves to, I've noticed that he loves to kind of almost show off now his athletic prowess. He kind of
it's true.
Yeah. He, I think we've gone to improve his jumping technique.
Yeah.
As a result of that, he tries to out jump everyone, whether it's the box jumps or whether it's the broad jumps or something like that. And then there was one moment he injured his wrist.
Yeah, both of them, because he was doing the box jump in the very high setting, and he somehow kind of tripped on the edge of the box and nearly tipped it over, went over it himself and landed on both his hands and managed to crack the 2 bones that are just below the elbow. And luckily it was a clean crack, and it was both hands, and he recovered without a huge fuss or anything like that. But that was him challenging himself, absolutely, because he graduated from, I don't want anyone to watch me, to, I don't mind, I don't care, and I'm going to watch everybody else as well. Oh, look at that, what's he doing? Oh my God, I didn't, he even commented a couple of times when he saw, some bigger guys lifting really big weights. He's commented, oh my God, I didn't even think that would be possible. That's amazing to me. And I think that really, it took him out of himself. So he was inside himself so much in the beginning, and over time of being here, he started to look around and he started to see possibilities for himself. Yeah.
And then his strength has really shot up. He's on bench press, doing trap bar deads. He's doing, I think he's doing at least body weight now. We've started to ramp up the weights a little bit for him. And then also, what have you noticed from your perspective as a parent in terms of his mood, his demeanor, to where it was to where it is now, and what's been the biggest shift?
I think the same sort of behaviour that we were getting in gym was also at home. So he was very much inside himself and didn't really want to get too involved with a group. And, you know, since he's been here, he's grown his circle of friends. He's really relaxed with older people as well. Which is great because, you know, when we have people over for dinner or we're going out in we holiday in a group or something like that, he gets involved and he has a chat. And he's only 15. But he'll sit with a group of adults and feel comfortable enough to have a chat now. And he does that here as well at gym. He chats with the older guys and, you know, it's a place he looks forward to coming to now. Whereas I don't think in the start he looked forward to coming here. Yeah.
I think he may have just seen it as just like a challenge or a hurdle or something. It's like, oh, do I need to do this? But then everything's just shifted that, you know, from that, it's now a place that he really enjoys and really like. Every time he comes in, sometimes we have to pull him up. It's like, hey, Connor, hey, we're going to move on. Next exercise, what do you got next?
Yeah.
Which is great. And it's a lot easier for me to coach someone like that and trying to like bring him back down to focus more on the training side than trying to bring someone up on the other end. Then what have you noticed in terms of academics?
So at school, he's obviously grown his group of friends, like I mentioned. And that's a big part of being comfortable and happy at school. So that probably, you know, on flows. But his academic approach has changed. So, you know, he was really resistant to doing any schoolwork at home. He would always work it out at school, breaks and lunchtime, and, you know, try and work hard during class to get things done so he didn't have to do any work at home. And over the last couple of years, he's come to terms with that work and the fact that he's not going to be able to avoid having it happen at home. And his marks have just been on an upward trajectory. So we haven't had any commentary from the teachers about him needing special assistance, which was pretty much all of his primary school years, was all about special assistance.
Wow.
And then his high school years are now about advancement. So, okay, we're in advanced maths. Okay, now we're in the year above us and in that advanced maths. So he's now going to do year 11 maths in year 10 and complete one of those VCE modules early, which if someone had said that to me during his primary school years, I wouldn't have even imagined it. So, you know, that's and I see his marks are just always now just improving all the time.
It sounds like he's a lot more secure in himself.
Yeah,
he actually is.
And that's, you know, the ability to talk to older people means that he can talk to his teachers and he can ask questions and he can have a conversation with them. So it kind of, you know, that social aspect on flows into being able to achieve and to understand his academia. Yeah.
And then when you're secure with yourself, everything just becomes a lot easier. So basically, summing it up, his grades have improved. He's got a greater social circle. He can interact with adults in different settings here, and obviously with whether it's your family, friends, or something like that, or relatives. Then basically, that means when he's actually ready to enter into the real world, that he'll have some basic social, like actually, I won't say basic, but like some pretty good social skills when he does want to get his first part-time job, doing whatever it may be, you know, whether it's, you know, customer facing or behind the scenes, that he'll be able to better interact. And then I reckon he'll be a great employee no matter where he goes.
Yeah, he's really learned how to work hard. That's true. But also trying new things for him now is not daunting. You know, we took a family ski trip for the first time ever, and not only was he, you know, excited to try something new, which is quite physical if you have never done it before. So skiing can be, you know, a bit daunting. He took a little bit to pick it up, and then he was, by the end of the trip, he was the best one out of the three, new skiers. He was the most progressed after the 3 days. So that, I think, comes down to here as well. So if he decides he's going to do something physically active now, he's got the confidence to think to himself that, I train enough that this won't be impossible for me. And he comes at it with a really positive attitude as well. And yeah, I would never have imagined that 3 years ago.
Yeah. And I guess what was because we've had a discussion previously, you mentioned that doing strength training, you said strength training wasn't really for your son. You mentioned something along those lines or something like that. Did you want to just elaborate on that? Or you didn't think it was going to be for him? I think that was the conversation that we had.
I didn't know how it would go because he wasn't interested in any kind of physical activity, and I'd struggled to get him out at all. So I didn't know whether he would push himself and progress towards that stage where he would see a real kind of capacity in weight training. I always just thought possibly he would just, my expectation, my hopes were that he would just learn to stand up straighter, be more coordinated so that he wouldn't fall over for no reason, which did happen a fair bit, and that, he'd become conscious of where his body was in space. And that were my big ones. But also with him growing so fast, I was a bit conscious that he needed to have physical activity for his muscles and the health of his muscles and bones. Yeah.
Then, because is quite a tall kid, and unfortunately, because as you mentioned during the lockdowns, he grew 30 centimeters. Like that's a lot in a very short window of time. And then you would have probably seen his motor skill and coordination actually decrease as a result of going through that big growth spurt.
He did.
Yeah. So then I know for him, we had to kind of like retrain him. I remember the first training programs that we did. It was so basic, very simple, just to try and establish some basic movement and positions. And I know sometimes he would feel like stiff as well, as you mentioned, because his posture, if he's behind the computer or, just horizontal all the time, that he would find it really difficult just to hold certain positions. But, lately he's been absolutely, performing really well, doing split squats with a little bit of load, doing some trap bar deadlifts, doing bench press, doing overhead presses, and getting into positions that, that most kids probably wouldn't even thought that would be possible. Then as a result, that learning and the strength and development has just like a positive correlation. And then you also mentioned to me previously about PE as well, that he used to struggle with PE.
Yeah, he did, and he didn't like, he didn't like that day at school. He'd always come home and he'd be like, oh, such a bad day. And now I hear him come home and say, oh, I was third at the top of my class for that exercise in the, they do that testing.
Oh, like yo-yo or beep test or something like that?
Yeah, they do beep. And he'll say, oh, I was the third one before everyone went out. I was one of the last three. And I'd be like, wow, that's pretty good. Yeah. I know you've got long legs, I know that, but it also told me that he was no longer the last to be picked for the team. Yeah. So he's somewhere now in the middle of the crowd, and that's all he needs to be. So that's good.
Yeah, because I know. Yeah, because sport is not a big part of his life.
No.
I think he's going to be more like going into engineering or something like that.
Yeah.
It's probably where we see him going in the next 3 to 5 years.
And you never know with him too. He's surprised me so many different ways in the last couple of years. I don't actually know, and he's only 15. There are plenty of athletes that didn't start hard training until after they were 17 or 18. So I suppose with him, at least now, he's got the building blocks and the awareness of his own body, that if he wants to go further and if he wants to pick up a sport and get serious about it, he can.
Yeah. I think he's got the build of a rower. He really does.
Or a basketballer.
Yeah, we'll see how he goes. But I guess what have been the three main takeaways, and kind of like any misconception that's kind of been broken for you, or that would be valuable for any parents that are listening to this?
Pretty much that if your child is not tending towards sports, it doesn't mean that they can't move towards like a gym training type of... Like
fitness or something.
Yeah,
like that.
It doesn't mean they can't do gym workouts. And the value for those gym workouts is it just starts to blanket across everything they do, So even though you might get resistance, if you can get past that first little while and, start to open up their conception of human movement and start to give them an understanding of human movement in a gym. And especially, it sounds like an advertisement, but especially here at Inner Athlete, where you do have enough staff that are watching, and that, these guys don't just build programs and give you instruction. They're also... and he's having a moment where he thinks everything's wrong in the world. These guys talk to him and, help him see through it and help him come out the other side and keep going, even though something's not right.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is that we're in the gym environment, we're putting them under pressure. Can they step up to the mark, or, do they fail? And I think it's a place where you can fail safely. With safety rails, you get spotted and all that jazz. We break through, misconceptions of one's ability, physical ability, which basically will manifest into their mental ability as well. Oh, I can't do this, I'm too tired, blah, blah, blah. And they end up doing it, and I was like, was it really that difficult? And they're like, probably not, it was all right. All right, cool. Let's do the same thing again and see if you can get a little bit more next time. And then we start kind of like chipping away of their preconceived notions of themselves. So I think a lot of teenagers have built themselves of what they're going to be like. All right. Then in a gym environment, we can pressure test it to see whether or not that's actually true or false, whether or not their physical ability actually stacks up to where they think they are mentally, and see whether or not if they're on the right path or they're completely off track. And, for kids that aren't physically active, usually they're more off track than anything else, just because they haven't been actually pressure tested in an environment like this, where we can, do fitness testing or get them under a bar and see how they actually respond to it and how they actually step up to the mark with that. But doing it in a way where it's actually somewhat achievable. So it's like 1 or 2 steps ahead of where they currently are as well. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that we've seen with it's never been about a 6-month goal or a 12-month goal specifically for him. It's been more about just, let's get through the session, let's see how you go on this set. And we kind of undershoot just to see where he's at. It's like, can we go a little bit heavier? It's like, oh yeah, all right, let's go a little bit heavier. Then we just bump it up a little bit more from there as well. So, I think, your son's done really well, and even as well, and breaking her preconceived notions of her ability, because she is quite tall as well, and even them training together, like, I know sometimes it gets annoying because all they do is
dynamic
talk.
of brother and sister.
Yeah, two years apart, and they're just like, clashing heads, but in a way that's, I guess, like, friendly, but also character building. I'll call it, character building. Then as a result, then we're starting to see that manifest into their school, into the relationships with their friends, family. Then I think your daughter's obviously, she's got part-time work. She's also got jiu-jitsu. Then your son, then obviously, he's going to he is of working age essentially now. So, and then he's been doing work with your husband as well.
Yeah, so he's come into the family business a few times, and he got himself a white card. So he's and again, that involves him being around a group of adults and having to communicate with them and take instruction from them. So, like I said, it's like a blanket. It just seems to cover everything. And he now can take instructions from people, and he can understand where his body is when he's at a workplace and he's being instructed on how to, pressure test a tyre or work a machine or something like that. He can take that instruction now.
And he's doing manual labour. That's the thing. Mm-hmm. Where beforehand, he probably wouldn't even wouldn't even touch it. Now it's like, oh yeah, I can do this. And he might struggle with it and figure it out, but eventually he'll get there.
Yeah.
So it's really great to see both of their development, especially with your son, and how much progress we've seen in such a short period of time as well. But we could have discussed anything got to do with, the physical development with them both, but I think we've seen so much in terms of the application of when they're training here and how it's actually applied to everything that they do as well. And then it's actually just setting them up for the real world, and they actually will become more resilient when they do enter, whether it's university or full-time work, and they're going to be able to better tolerate it compared to, I guess their peers.
Yeah. No, I'm really glad that it turned out the way it did. I feel like that was one of the, the best directions that that my son went in. I mean, my daughter needed it as well, but my son in particular, it was one of the best things that we did.
No, it's good. I'm glad they're still here and still doing really well. I think we'll wrap it up there for today.
Okay.
Unless you got anything else you want to add?
No. Just a big thank you to everybody who's mentored my son along the way and had this impact on him.
Yeah, and I think we'll have to do another episode on mentoring and how that plays into the strength training and the symbiosis of the two. Just like how martial arts has, Gary Sensei, then they also have the mentoring side that comes with that, because it is quite challenging to some degree, because you're challenging people's beliefs of themselves and others as well. It's good. If you like this episode, please like, share, subscribe. It really does help us in the long term, because we want to share this out with parents, youth athletes, sports coaches. We want to be able to, change the way strength training is perceived for youth, because there's so much more upside and little to no downside with
100%,
it.
yeah.
Cool. Until the next one.
All
Thanks.
right. Thanks.
You have just listened to the Inner Athlete podcast. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with the release of weekly episodes. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram to get great tips on all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring.